Hi guys, welcome to episode 6 of the Brighton Jazz School podcast. Lots of exciting things happening at the moment, but I'm going to tell you what you're in store for the show first of all. Album of the week is Ray Brown's Some of My Best Friends Are Singers, and I absolutely love this album. It's got some really heavyweight musicians and singers on it, so more on that a bit later. We've got a great interview for you today. It's Frank Harrison, and he's a piano player. Played with lots of great musicians, most notably Gilad Atzmon, but he's a fine pianist, and he's just released a trio record called Sideways, which is just really gorgeous, and we'll check that out a bit later on. I'm going to feature it in Track of the Week a bit later, so it's a really great interview. I've known Frank for quite some time, and we got together. We had a bit of a play as well. He's got a lovely piano, he's got a U3, and then we had to go on the roads there, doing some double piano road stuff, so that was good fun. And he's got some really good tips for improvisers as well, so stay tuned for that. In the student information section, which incidentally I've decided with the help of Charlie, was his suggestion, just to simply call them by the names of the course. I don't know why I didn't think of that before. Really simple. So we're going to call this section Learn to Play and Learn to Listen, which will obviously correspond to what we're doing in the courses in real life. Not that this podcast isn't real life, it is. It's definitely me, and I'm definitely talking to you, and you're definitely listening, so it must be real life. But anyway, you get the point. So in the Learn to Play class this week, we were looking at pentatonic scales, the usage of, first of all, in quite a simple way, because the pentatonic scale is a very simple scale. And then we applied it to a slightly more complex set of, not chord changes, but implying pentatonic scales over existing chords to get a slightly out sort of sound, outside playing. So a bit more on that later on. In the Learn to Listen, we were checking out hard bop players. This is sort of stems after the Learn to Listen session last week, where we featured the Miles Davis Prestige recordings. So this week we checked out Clifford Brown, Cannonball Adderley, Art Blakey, and some other great players of that period. It really was a great session. We really, we checked out also Hank Mobley, No Room for Squares, and the great album Soul Station. And finally, in Track of the Week, I'm going to feature a track from Frank's new album Sideways. So stay tuned for that. It's a really great album. You can get that from frankharrison.net. It's called Sideways, as I said, and it's on Amazon as well. So I'm going to try and get him to come and do a workshop or a masterclass at Brighton Jazz School in the quite near future. So you'll be able to sort of ask him specific questions. So take a listen to this album. It's really great, and formulate some questions. And the masterclass will be open to non-Brighton Jazz School students as well. So if you're listening and you're not a part of the school, but you like what we do, and you don't live too far away, then you'll be more than welcome to come and join us on that. So that's about it really for the show. I've got some other exciting news, personal news. My brother Stuart and his fiancée Dita have had their first child today, so I'm a very proud uncle. So all the best to you, and I can't wait to see JC, and I hope you get some sleep, because I think you're going to be lacking in that department for the next few years. But all the best, guys, and very glad everything has gone okay, and I'll see you guys very soon. So in other news, we've got some really quite nice statistics, lovely graphs and things that tell me how many people are listening to the podcast and downloading it, which are looking really healthy, I have to say. We've been going just over a month now, and Libsyn is telling me that there has been over 1,020 to be exact downloads through iTunes since we started. So that's really pretty good. That doesn't include people streaming from their computers or viewing it outside of iTunes, so like from the website or on the YouTube channel. So we're definitely reaching quite a good number of people here, and I couldn't be happier. And I also noticed that one of our tracks, I think it's the last podcast, is now third. If you type in Jazz Podcast into iTunes, it's now third in the world, which is really amazing. So thank you so much for tuning in. It really does make all the difference, and thank you for everybody that's given 5-star ratings. We haven't actually got any stars less than 5, so we're doing something right, and that's really encouraging. So thanks again, guys, and sit back and relax, get your favourite drink, as ever, and enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome to Album of the Week. This week we're checking out an album by the bass player Ray Brown, and it's called Some of My Best Friends Are Singers. It's actually a series of albums that Ray did, featuring some of the greatest musicians around. And yeah, the title of them are Some of My Best Friends Are. So he had like guitarists, piano players, sax players, etc. And they're all really great. But this one in particular, the singers one, is it's one of my favourite albums, and it's just it's got some great singers, but the playing on it is just great. The accompanying, the way the rhythm section kind of support each singer. I mean, each singer is very, very different. Let's see, I'll go down the list here. So we've got Diana Krall, Etta Jones, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Nancy King, Marlena Shaw, Kevin Mahogany. He's the only male vocalist on it. But all of those singers are very, very different, and the way the rhythm section sort of handle, how they improvise is really quite remarkable. It's a very rounded album. I can listen to it from start to finish, and it really feels like the finished product. It's like reading a great novel. It's got structure within the album. I mean, each song is really fantastic, but it really does read well as an entire album. Each song, like I said, I don't think there's one song that isn't great. I mean, the playing, the way the singers convey the song, but also the way they put their own personality on the song. A highlight for me is Dee Dee Bridgewater's version of Cherokee. It starts off like a sort of slow ballad, and then they really go into it. And Ralph Moore's solo on that is just superb. I've transcribed it actually, and it's just great playing. Fantastic example of playing changes. Another highlight is the opening track, I Thought About You, and for me, Keezer is on fine form here. The way he comps behind Diana Krall is just simply stunning, and his solo on that is mind-blowing. Lovely block chords, it's just really swinging, and it's just a great way to start the whole album. So yeah, Mahogany does a version of Skylark, which is great, and The Party's Over, which is a tune that's not very often played. And again, he's one of the real great jazz singers of the time, and he doesn't fail to deliver on this album. Diana Krall really, in my view, really kind of it's her at her best, I think. I mean, I'm not a massive fan, I have to say. I mean, I love her piano playing. I think she's a great piano player. But some of the most recent stuff she's done, I can't remember the name of the album, but the one with strings, and I mean, as nice as they are, I think she's got more in her. I really like the album she did that was the Nat King Cole tribute with I think it was John Clayton and or maybe it was Christian McBride. I think it was Christian McBride and Russell Malone, just a trio doing some of the Nat King Cole favourites. And she was great on that, and she's sort of reverting back to that way of doing things on this album. And she does another tune called Little Boy, which she does a great scat solo on. We don't hear enough of her singing in that mould, as far as I'm concerned. But another one, Marlena Shaw, who's a great singer, and you don't hear a lot of her around, but she's fantastic. She swings like the best of them, and she really has studied jazz, obviously. I mean, you when she solos, you can really kind of hear the influence of many great instrumentalists. She can sing like a horn player. And she does a version of At Long Last Love, which is so swinging. It's just really, really gorgeous. And she also does a ballad called Imagination, which is one of my favourite ballads, but she really does it well. Etta Jones, who we lost a few years ago now, just a great singer, so full of soul and so full of stories. When she sings, In a way, she reminds me of Billie Holiday in the way that she can communicate a song. I mean, she sounds nothing like Billie, but just the communication, the level of profoundness in her singing is amazing. And she does Poor Butterfly, and then she does a version of No Greater Love, which is really bluesy and just gets to the very root of that song. And the great Nancy King does a version of But Beautiful, with Antonio Hart doing a great solo on that. And then she's featured on the very last track called The Perfect Blues, with, again, Antonio doing a fantastic solo. And I think Ray Brown composed that. But that's a great song in itself. I think a couple of the students did that, maybe last year. I transcribed it, and it really is just such a fun, great track. And the head is really quite nice. It's got some nice diminished-y things going on. Quite an interesting head. Oh, just to let you know, head means like the tune. If we're playing a song that's a repeated sort of chord sequence, like I Got Rhythm or blues, you normally refer to the tune as the head. That's just a bit of jazz terminology there. Check this album out. It's really great. The playing on it, as I said, is just superb. Keezer, in my view, is one of the great vocal accompanists on piano. But obviously Ray Brown, the presence of his big bass tone and just the swing, it doesn't get any swingier than this, really. Just a fantastic album. Hope you check it out, and let me know what you think on the forum, brightonjazzschool.com, and would love to hear your comments. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the guest artist interview. This week we're joined by the fantastic pianist Frank Harrison. And I've known Frank for quite a few years. We first met in Cambridge all those many moons ago, I think sort of the late 90s. And Frank was sort of resident pianist, really, at the pub called the Elm Tree, which was kind of a live venue in Cambridge where quite a lot of great musicians came through there. And I remember seeing Frank playing with, Gilad Atzmon and... what's the trumpet player?
Nick Hill.
Yeah. Great players. So this is going to be a great interview. He's just got a new album out, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But welcome, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And just to get started, how did you get involved in music as a youngster? Did you have it around the house? Is anyone in your family musical?
Yeah, my parents didn't play, but they listened to a lot of music, and my dad's we listened to mostly classical, but he had some Ellington and Errol Garner and Billie Holiday and some Monk, and I think there was one family holiday where we listened to a lot of Billie Holiday, and that really got me into it.
Okay.
And then we got home, and my older sister was playing classical piano, and so we had a piano, and I just started trying to pick out those tunes from Billie Holiday.
Oh wow!
On our terrible Victorian upright.
Great. So right from the beginning, you were trying to transcribe.
Yeah. Well, I think at 11 I basically started with that, and then I from there I tried having some classical lessons, which lasted about a year or so because I just wasn't responding well to dots on the page. Yeah.
So and you really quickly improved, very quickly. From if you started at 11, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want was it the Perrier Jazz or?
No, I think I got second place in Young Jazz Musician of the Year.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got that?
18.
Wow.
I think.
That's great. And so who are your primary influences, piano-wise, first of all?
I'd say Bill Evans was the first person who I got kind of obsessively into and just listened to non-stop and almost exclusively for a few years.
Yeah.
And he's probably the guy that I still always come back to and feel most at home with. Mm-hmm. But then after that, Keith Jarrett was a big influence.
Yeah.
And I still listen to him all the time.
Yeah.
I think those are the two big ones. And then I think probably until I was about 18, I was kind of really a bit religiously into those two guys.
Yeah.
And it was only from around 18 or 19 that I actually started to try and broaden my listening a bit and discover other people.
Yeah. Can you remember the first time that you played professionally, i.e. got paid?
Got paid. I think actually our school big band did a gig where we each got £5 at the end.
Oh, nice.
It'd have been that.
Okay. That's a lot of money for a jazz musician these days.
Yeah. It's gone down since then. I think the first real playing, I guess, was in restaurants. I started playing in restaurants when I was kind of 15 or so.
Yeah.
And which was actually great. I really enjoyed that because it was quite a challenge to fill 3 hours 3 times a week solo piano.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of set myself challenges like well, actually, first of all, I learnt a lot of tunes then. Because I didn't want to play the same stuff, so I kind of ended up with sort of 300 tunes or something that I was playing regularly. And to keep it interesting, I'd do things like go in and decide I was going to play all of the tunes a semitone up, and then all the tunes a tone up, and then a minor third up.
Right.
And do a whole night, a quarter tone away from the original keys, which obviously nobody else in the restaurant would have noticed, but it was a good practice for me. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I did exactly the same thing, funnily enough.
Right.
So who sort of did you play with in those earlier days? Did you sort of, going the transition from solo piano into a group setting, did you work with a trio, bass and drums? Or?
No, well, actually with Nick Hill, who you mentioned before, we played a lot. We did some restaurant gigs, and then we started playing this gig in the pub gig in Cambridge, and that was really great because we'd get different guests up each week.
Yeah.
And Nick's a great player as well.
Yeah.
So that was the first kind of real band experience.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think of the names who might have been in that. Was it Mike on bass?
Mike Harris
on
bass, and Johnny Gregory on drums.
Johnny Gregory, yeah.
Although we called him the Gregoire.
Yes.
Because he's exotic.
Yeah. Great brushes, really good on brushes, wasn't he?
Yeah, I played with them all actually recently.
Oh, really?
A few months ago, I had a gig in Bedford with not with Mike sadly, but with Nick and the Gregoire.
Yeah, wow.
Drums, and it's great fun.
Oh, I'd love to have seen that. Brilliant. And how's Nick doing?
He's good.
Is he good?
Yeah. Anyone in Bedford should check him out. I forget the name of the pub now, but he plays a pub gig every Monday there.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So when did you get the call from Gilad? Was he your first sort of name gig?
Yeah, he actually. Well, he came to play at the Elm Tree, and then I had a fundraising gig to get money to go to Berkeley in Boston, and that was in Boxford, a venue called the Fleece, which is still going in a different place. They very kindly put on a benefit gig for me, and I booked Gilad for that to play in as a quartet.
Yeah.
So yeah, he always jokes that he started off in my band and then he took over, and then I went off to the States and came. Lasted one semester at Berkeley, and then came back and started playing with him pretty much straight after that.
Right.
That was like 12 years ago, and we're still playing.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Why is it that all the great musicians seem to do like 1 or 2 semesters at Berkeley and then they sort of drop out or get kicked out? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. Jarrett was kicked out, wasn't he?
Got kicked out. Yeah. Putting pins in the piano or something.
Yeah. Repeatedly after being told not to.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it was that there was certain classes that I really wanted to take and people I wanted to study with, and I was told that I would be able to, but not until say the 3rd year.
Oh, really?
And I thought it was just a silly system. I'd need to do a lot of stuff that I wasn't really finding that interesting. Just to get to the good stuff,
right? I see.
But what I was really enjoying doing was just playing with the students.
Yeah.
So I quit the course, but I used up the last 4 months of my visa just living there and playing. Great.
I guess probably you probably played with some pretty heavyweight people around that time.
Yeah. There were loads of. It was just full of incredible musicians.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And it was a huge kick up the arse as well. I think a lot of people, when they go to Berkeley, when they first get there, are kind of a bit shocked that everybody practices like 6 hours a day. And I'd been practicing a bit. I've been practicing maybe a couple of hours a day or something. But you get there and you see that, and it's like a religion, and you kind of have to decide, like, how seriously do I take this? And for me, that was a really good thing, because it just made me take it more seriously and think, actually, I need to dedicate more time to this.
Sure, that's great. And who did you have a piano teacher from Berkeley at that time?
A guy called Steve Hunt. He's kind of more a fusion guy.
Okay.
This sounds rude, but I kind of got him by default, actually, because I arrived late because the American Embassy lost my passport and stuff. So I got to the course a little bit in, and to be honest, I had the choice between two teachers I've never heard of, so I picked him randomly. And it was good. He's a good teacher, and we had a lot of fun together. Yeah.
Cool stuff. Yeah, having heard you play over the years, I know that you love the Great American Songbook and all those lovely standards. But how do you approach writing?
I don't know if I have an approach. I think I basically just sit at the piano and play. And I mean, play as in mess around and explore.
See what comes out.
And sometimes it just comes out quickly. Sometimes it takes a few days of sort of refining something.
But how do you know when you've stumbled upon something good? Because I know when I'm trying to sort of, if I've got a bit of spare time and I think, oh, what shall I do? I'll try and write a tune, or I'll just play around. Sometimes I'll play through stuff, and there's so much stuff there that how do you know the right thing to choose from all that stuff, and then develop that one thing?
I guess you don't really, and you just have to be willing to accept that a lot of what comes out isn't going to be very good, and you might not write a great tune. I think just the practice of doing it and trying not to judge too much what's coming out is the thing. There are definitely some more conscious things that you can do. One of the tunes I wrote recently, which is on the album actually, started off as a 12-tone row.
Okay.
Or at least I got about 10 notes in. And I'd sort of written 10 notes in a row, which were all different, and thought, that's kind of interesting. And then I put the other two in and they didn't sound right, so then I started changing them, and now it's not a 12-tone row at all. But it was kind of an interesting starting point, because I'd never done that before, and it kind of came somewhere nice, but I didn't want to be too strict about it just for the sake of having a tune with no repeated notes in.
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting way of writing things. I think Bill Evans did a few. Time Remembered is one that I'm not sure if that was the similar concept, but certainly, in that period he was writing stuff. What's the other one? Very early. Those tunes are very different to kind of say Waltz for Debbie or
I mean, I guess some of Evans's compositions, you can hear a lot of logic in, and sort of almost maths in the way they're constructed, but they never stick to that resolutely, really, because obviously he knew the music was more important than the logic. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well that leads in quite well to my next question, which is, can you give us a tip, improvisation tip, anything specific or very, very broad that you think might be useful to our students and listeners on the spot?
I'd say probably to master the basics. I think being able to play in time and to swing are just the most important thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of skip that, or they're so in a hurry to get onto the advanced stuff that they hear other people doing, that they end up playing some of those advanced stuff, and they end up playing all this very clever stuff, but it's not completely on it time-wise.
Yeah, it's not the finished thing.
Yeah. And 2 or 3 well-chosen notes played with beautiful time and swinging means so much more than thousands of notes just not quite in the pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think just to always go back and keep working on the most basic things. I actually, I've been playing these Hanon virtuoso pianist exercises for quite a while. These are these sort of it's a book of exercises from early 20th century, and you start off playing them at 60 BPM in semi-quavers, and then you meant to kind of, as you get better at them, you increase the metronome speeds, and eventually you're doing it at 108 BPM, which is sort of fairly fast when you're playing these exercises. And I was doing that, and I got to 108 BPM over months. I was doing it. I was just increasing it really gradually, 1 BPM at a time, and I got to playing it at 108 BPM and felt really comfortable with it. And then I thought, out of interest, I'll see what it feels like to play it at 60 again.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I was my left hand, and I realised I hadn't learnt it properly. My left hand was bluffing. It was kind of getting hidden below the right, and it wasn't articulating properly. And I realised I had to go back. So now every day I'm playing it at 60 and at 108, so that I know that I'm actually playing each note.
Both extremes, and also, like you said, it's sometimes harder to play things slowly because there's more, there's more time, more scope for things to kind of go wrong. When you're playing quicker, you can mask them a bit easier. So I think that's valid. To practice everything slowly as well. And just to play really simple stuff beautifully, just to leave a lot of time and try and do everything well, rather than just try and do as much stuff as you can. Quality over quantity. Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks, Frank. Where can we find out where you're playing and buy your album and check out what you're doing? On
my website, which is frankharrison.net. There's gigs there. There are links to where you can buy the music.
Great.
I'm on Twitter as well, strangely.
Okay.
So I'm there as Frank Harrison 88.
Yeah. Okay. And any upcoming gigs locally? I mean, localish?
Not around Brighton. Well, actually, no, in London on Easter Sunday, we're doing a trio set at King's Place.
Great.
This is part of a course and sort of mini festival organised by Global Music Foundation. So it should be a nice night. We're doing one set with my trio, and Bruce Bath's trio is doing a set, and Kit Downs is doing a solo set.
Oh yeah, great. Okay, well that's great. So thanks, Frank. It's been great talking to you, and well, who knows? Maybe we'll get you along to do a talk at the jazz school. That would be great.
Great.
Workshop or something. But thanks again for the interview, and we'll see you around.
Cool, thank you.
Cheers. So in this week's Learn to Play class, we were looking at the usage of pentatonic scales. Now, a pentatonic scale, as it says on the tin, is basically a 5-note scale. It can be any 5 notes, doesn't have to be in a particular order, although there are some that we sort of make more use of. Most importantly, the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic. Now, in the key of C, I'm just going to spell these out for you. It's C, D, E, G, A, C. And the minor pentatonic is the same, but with an E flat there, so it's got the minor third in. Many books and tutors sort of start by introducing improvisation using the pentatonic scale because it is a very basic, let's say basic, it's a very simple scale. That doesn't necessarily make it basic, but it's a simple sound and it's very flexible, which is why, as jazz musicians we love to use them. They create a very sort of folk-like sort of melody, or used in the right way, they can be very, very punchy and very, very what's the word here I'm looking for? It's a good starting point to kind of start to look at improvising outside, using outside techniques. So in other words, playing melodic lines that don't technically fit the chords. So in other words, you're playing the wrong notes which actually sound like they're the right notes. Western harmony can't really figure out properly why a lot of jazz musicians can actually create melody, because according to Western harmony they should be wrong. So this is an area that's very fascinating, but it's an area of jazz improvisation that really it transcends Western sort of notion of what is right and wrong, and so it's very difficult, therefore, to describe this using Western ways of analysing things. So we spent most of the time playing the pentatonic scale, and I was demonstrating how to sort of utilise different pentatonic scales on one chord. So if you take a C7, for example, the most sort of inside sound using a pentatonic scale is the C pentatonic scale, because if you play the C major pentatonic scale, you're using the root, the ninth, the third, the fifth, and the 13th. So in other words, C, D, E, G, and A. One way of creating a bit of tension within that, while you're still on a C7, is to try other pentatonic scales. For example, the G-flat pentatonic scale is quite cool because it contains some of the upper structures of C7, so some of the more tastier notes. So G pentatonic is G flat, A flat, B flat, D flat, and E flat, and those notes yield the sharp 11, the flat 6, the 7th, the flat 9, and the sharp 9. Now all of those tones against a C7 are really crunchy. They're the upper structures. They're what makes jazz sound rich and interesting. So they're the good notes. And then we used another pentatonic scale that is really, really outside. It's a pentatonic scale based on the B. So the fact that it starts on a B natural when we're playing a C7, which for those of you who haven't studied a bit of theory, C7 has got a minor 7th. It's a B flat that's in the chord there. So if we produce a pentatonic scale starting on B, we're already starting on a note that doesn't exist technically within that chord. So it's quite a dissonant one, and the notes are B, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. So that is, we get the natural 7th against the minor 7th, then we get the flat 9, the sharp 9, sharp 11, and flat 13. So the rest of these notes are pretty exotic sounding, and by sort of creating these layers of harmonies, we're actually creating a sense of form and a sense of structure by the consistency of the pentatonic sound itself. So think of this as sort of layers of harmony. So we've got the notes of the pentatonic scale, but we've also got the fact that we're playing a pentatonic scale. So just like a few weeks ago we were looking at the fourth intervals, you could describe that as playing in the key of fourths. I know that sounds a bit funny, but what I'm saying is that the simple fact that you're playing the fourths is creating structure in itself, and it's the same thing here. So we're playing a pentatonic sound. Try and think of it like that, and then obviously we're superimposing different pentatonic scales on the one chord to vary the tension and release. So here's a few pointers on playing outside using pentatonic scales. If you're playing just outside with no sort of backdrop for these scales to work off of, it's not going to sound great. Outside playing always sounds better in context, so a mixture of inside playing, and outside playing. It can't all be outside, because it will just, after a while, it will get boring and it will sound too dissonant and therefore sound wrong. So that's the first point. So outside playing always works better when you're doing a lot of inside playing, basically. So obviously, to be able to attempt to play outside, you have to have a really, really good knowledge of how to play inside, first of all. But for the beginners out there, this is still a valid thing to try and practice. Be aware of the sound. Be aware that you should be able to hear when players go outside of the chords and come back in again, even though you're a beginner, and even though you might not be practicing this stuff for a few years or a few months or whatever. But it's good to be aware of it. Okay, never exclusively just use pentatonic scales. That seems obvious, but you never want to just create a solo just of all pentatonic sounds, unless it's that kind of tune. If it's a modal tune, well, even if it is a modal tune, I'm not sure you would just exclusively use one type of scale. The thing about modal tunes is that you've obviously got to sustain the interest over long periods of one chord, which is a challenge in itself. So yeah, I would say that they work best in amongst other scales and techniques. Okay, now you can try playing outside by simply shifting the pentatonic scale up or down a semitone. McCoy Tyner, Michael Brecker, Woody Shaw, Coltrane, Dave Liebman, Alan Holdsworth, and specifically Chick Corea are absolute masters of outside playing, but they're all masters of inside playing, as well, and that's the important point. That's how they can make this work. But Chick Corea in particular uses a lot of pentatonic type sounds with fourth intervals, as does McCoy. So check those players out. We had a quick listen to one of the greatest trio recordings by Chick, or maybe by anyone. Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, and I've transcribed the first chorus of Matrix, which is actually a blues. Chick really uses lots of outside playing, lots of substitutions and stuff, and quite a lot of pentatonic sounds, sequences coming down in various formats, resolving through the chords. So we took a quick look at that. And that's a really good place to start to sort of utilize pentatonic sounds. Start with simple tunes that you know the forms of really well, like a blues or blue bossa, or a modal tune like So What or Impressions. You can really sort of have the freedom, have the space, have the intellectual space to kind of think about this as well. So there you go. So have a go at that and let us know how you get on. But as ever, listen to lots of players that use this scale, different pentatonic scales. Try and superimpose, a G flat pentatonic over. So we're talking about C7 here. Try and impose a B natural pentatonic or B pentatonic over the C. So try that on different dominant chords. So you're looking at the flat 5 pentatonic and the natural 7th pentatonic in more generic terms. Okay, so have some fun with that, and join us next time on the Learn to Play section. In the Learn to Listen class this week, we checked out some of the great players of the hard bop period. Now, hard bop is a subgenre of bebop that developed in the mid-50s, really following the death of Charlie Parker. But whereas the bop vocabulary was based on pop and show tunes, hard bop really took its influence from the blues and gospel music, sometimes called soul jazz, and normally it's sort of got a more funkier sort of flavour, more rootsy flavour, that can also incorporate Afro-Cuban styles, salsa, mambo, Latin rhythms as well. And hard bop really made use of the shout choruses, the call and response, so some of the primary attributes of blues music. So we kicked off the listening session by checking out Clifford Brown. Now, Clifford Brown is a highly rated American jazz trumpet player. He was born in 1930 in October and sadly died way too young at the age of 25 in 1956. He was killed in a horrific car accident that also took the life of Richie Powell, Bud Powell's piano playing brother. So we checked out his album called A Study in Brown. Now there's actually only 4 years worth of recordings, but this one in particular is great. Another one is called Brownie, which is another great album. But this one from 1954, so quite later on in his career, really shows him, I think, at his best. So we checked out the first opening track, which is Cherokee, a blues by Clifford called Sandu. and then a great track called George's Dilemma. We then moved on to Art Blakey and checked out some of his most famous recordings, tunes like Along Came Betty. I also played one of the tracks from the session with Monk. We played Evidence, and of course Night in Tunisia, which was from Live at the Birdland. And the great thing about Art Blakey is that he had so many great players in different formations of the band, and he was a sort of champion of the younger generation, sort of later in the early 80s. So we have a whole host of great musicians working in that band, including my piano teacher James Williams, and alongside Keith Jarrett we had him for a while, then the great Benny Green, and then of course the last pianist to ever play with Blakey in that band was Jeffrey Keyser, who's now a patron of Brighton Jazz School, which is very exciting news, but more on that a bit later on. Now, we paid special attention to Hank Mobley, who I think is a very underrated tenor saxophone player. In my view, definitely one of the greats. He's often described as sort of not as aggressive as John Coltrane, as the tone that Train has, and not as mellow as Stan Getz. But at times, he really did sort of get really gritty, and you can hear the Coltrane influence. But very, very laid back, very bluesy, and slightly more subtle than Train, I would say. But we checked out the album No Room for Squares, which again is one of my favourites, alongside Soul Station. We didn't have time to kind of get through that, but we checked out 3 tracks. Three-Way Split, which is a great rhythm changes, the title track No Room for Squares, and a great tune called Carolyn, which features different rhythm section. We have Andrew Hill is on some of the tracks, and then we have Herbie Hancock. Philly Joe Jones is on all of the tracks, and we have a mixture of Donald Byrd and Lee Morgan. And who's on bass? It's Butch Warren and John Ory. So, and they all play on different tracks. So it's a really fantastic album. Great sort of 2 rhythm sections. A great way to sort of analyse how different rhythm sections work. So we ended the session with the great Cannonball Adderley, and paying special attention to the album The Quintet Live in San Francisco, which again features some great musicians. His brother Nat on trumpet or cornet, Mr. Hard Bop, Bobby Timmons on the piano, Sam Jones on bass, and Lewis Haynes on drums. So that's one of the great albums of that period. I could have played Mercy, 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 but everybody's heard that one, and he wrote so many great tunes, and many are featured on that album. Spontaneous Combustion is a great one, and also I played a track composed by the pianist Bobby Timmons called This Here. So next week on the Learn to Listen, we're continuing with the hard bop masters, but next week we're looking at Benny Golson, Art Farmer, Lee Morgan, Bobby Timmons, and probably a few more. You could do a whole course just on this one subgenre. Yeah, just get out there and listen to as much as you can, because it really is great music, feel good music. That's the one thing that Cannonball really brought. I don't think I've heard such a joyous, soulful saxophone player as him. Just so much spirit, so much energy. It just makes you feel good. So thanks for listening. Join us next week on the Learn to Listen session. Sadly, it's come to that time in the show where it's almost time to say goodbye, and it's always difficult because I really enjoy doing these shows, and sometimes I think, well, 45 minutes, 40 minutes is not enough, and it's a tough life. It's a tough life, but what you'll have to do is tune in again next week. This is a weekly podcast, so you can get your Brighton Jazz School podcast fix every single week. We release the new episodes at the weekend, normally on a Saturday. If it's been a particularly busy week, then maybe Sunday. But, stay tuned, stay in touch via the forum, brightonjazzschool.com. We now have a Facebook page dedicated to the podcast. So if you're on Facebook, please go and add us. Add me, it's Wayne McConnell, and also add Brighton Jazz School. We have a page there as well, and stay connected through there. Leave your comments, subscribe to us on iTunes, and stay in touch via the Brighton Jazz School website. So we've got some very exciting news that I'll be announcing next week. A few developments in the Brighton Jazz School world, which means a few doors opening for some really quite amazing interviews on this podcast. So more on that next week. But in the meantime, I'll leave you with the fantastic Frank Harrison Trio. And please do buy this CD. It's fantastic. Get it from frankharrison.net. It's also on Amazon and iTunes, I believe. So we're going to leave you with one of Frank's compositions, and this is called One. And I've got a feeling this is the one that he was talking about in the interview, where he started it off as a 12-tone row. So that ties in quite nicely. So enjoy this. It features David Petroka on double bass and Stephen Keogh on drums. Big thank you to Frank Harrison for doing the interview, and as ever, the glue of Brighton Jazz School, Mr. Mike Guest. And so whenever some people think when I say Mike Guest, I'm actually saying my guest. So I'm going to put Mr. in front of Mike. So Mr. Mike, thank you so much for your help with the podcast. It really wouldn't be possible without you. And thank you again to all my listeners. Thanks for joining us, and it really means a lot that you're checking these out, and we're obviously getting some really wonderful numbers. Please spread the word. Please share this podcast on Facebook. Please post about it wherever you can. Tell your friends. And yes, please spread the word. That would be really wonderful. So thanks again. This is Wayne McConnell signing off, and we'll see you next week.